Welcome. We are now going to be studying from a text that is called Kol Ba'ei Ha'olam. This is basically a compilation, excerpts of various different Sichos talks, essays by the Lubavitcher Rebbe Melech HaMoshiach about Sheva Mitzvos Bnei Noach. A couple of introductions. One, I don't know if this book is available in the market today. I can give you the phone number that's here in the beginning for the publisher, and you can try. It's a telephone and a fax number, 718-773-4939. And it's called Kol Ba'ei Olam, which means all of the people of the world, all of mankind. Second point, this book is compiled and presented for the Jew. It's put together to the Jew, teaching and telling and informing the Jew, again based on what the Rebbe Melech HaMashiach says, as to what's the Jew's obligation to go out and to teach and to influence the non-Jews, the Bnei Noach. So just bear that in mind. Some of which, or much of which, he brings down over here, we've already studied one way or another in one of our previous many classes. So some of it might seem repetitive if you've been following us for the past number of years, or if you're going to look up different classes that are available now. Otherwise, here, it's in smaller pieces. So for those people that listening to an hour and a half or more, which some of our classes were that long, is a bit too exhausting, and for whatever reason you don't have the ability or the patience or the time, whatever, this book is, generally speaking, much smaller, little bite-sized pieces, excerpts from those talks. Now, what we're going to start off with is a quote from a Sicha. Much of this book is in Hebrew, some of it is in Yiddish, all depending on the source material. One of the, if not the most, one of the primary talks about the obligation of Sheva Mitzvos Bnei Noach that the Jewish people have to teach the world is found in the Likutei Sichois Chaf Vav, volume 26 of the official talks and essays, if you will, of the Rebbe Melech HaMashiach. The Sicha, the talk, begins on page 132. And with the footnotes and everything, really goes through a tremendous amount, and it's through page 144. So the piece that we're going to learn today, as well as other parts, are taken from the Likutei Sichois here, volume 26. Now let us begin. We're on page 5 of Kol Ba'ei Olam. Der Ragachover sagt, the Ragachover, which was a genius of geniuses, a giant, he tells us as follows. As the Shitas Rambam, seine dort zwei Sugim, that according to the Rambam's approach, Maimonides, the Rambam's understanding, there are two types of people. And we're not talking about Jews, because Jews are not regular people. So, as far as the human race is concerned, excluding the Jewish people, there are two types. Aleph, a ger teishav, was is dafka, ben kibel bebezdin, bifnei shleisha chaverim. There is the individual called a ger teishav, the alien or the resident, convert or resident alien, however it would be translated. And that, in order for a person to have that status, by Jewish law, the halachic status, he needs to formally accept upon himself to keep the 7 commandments of the Noachites in front of a Jewish tribunal, a Beis Din of three proper, observant, learned Jews. Beis, the second type of people. A ben noyach was is nicht mekabel die sein mitzvahs beweist in. A ben noyach that does not accept formally in the presence of a beis din to keep the 7 commandments. All right, those are the two types of people that you can have: ger toishav and a regular ben noyach. Oder bisman hazeh she'ena yevel noyeg. Or nowadays, when we do not have the Jubilee year, and the yovel, the Jubilee year, is not in effect, as the Rambam tells us a number of times, and therefore we do not accept a ger toishav. This is the Rambam's ruling, almost in the exact same words. He says it in the laws of Avodah Zarah, the laws of Milah, the laws of Shabbos, and the laws of Isurei Bia. So 4 times, at least, the Rambam clearly says that we, the Jewish people, do not accept a ger toishav when there's no yovel. In order for there to be a yovel, you have to have all the Jewish people residing in the land of Israel. So therefore, for technicality, no fault of any non-Jews, they cannot be a ger toishav nowadays. So this individual that is not a ger toishav, when he's mekayim design mitzvahs, but he does fulfill the 7 commandments, was oich mitzuvin olav lachayosei. And such a person, we are also, the Jewish community is obligated lachayosei to support him, to assist him, to sustain him. Und wie bald, as oicha ben noyach, welcher is nicht kein ger toishav mitzuvin olav lachayosei. Now, since that being the fact, that a ben noyach, who is not a ger toishav, the Jewish community is also obligated to support, is doch muchrach zu sagen, so we must say then, as das was der Rambam sagt, that which the Rambam says, quoting from the Laws of Kings, where he primarily speaks about, that's the primary place where he speaks about Sheva Mitzvahs, towards the very end of the Rambam's Mishnah Torah. And we quote, Tziva Moshe Rabbeinu, Lakuf, Lekabel Mitzvahs Shnitztavu B'nei Noach, B'chol Mish Lo Yekabel Yeharig. Moses, our teacher, has commanded for the Jewish people to force, to compel the non-Jews to accept the commandments that the sons of Noach were commanded, and whoever does not accept them shall be killed. Meinter dermit, so what the Rambam means by telling us this, Nit tafka kabbalah b'fnei shleisha chaverim bevezdin, hav tzuveren ager toishav. The Rambam does not mean specifically that the non-Jew has to accept it in front of, as we said, 3 observant and learned Jews as a tribunal, as a court. Nor afilu kabbalah stam zu mekayim sein die sein mitzvahs. Der din von ben noach stam. But rather, when we say that they have to accept it, it just means a regular acceptance for themselves. No formal acceptance. But the Jewish people have to see to it that the non-Jews accept upon themselves, each person, to keep the 7 Ochad commandments, even if he's just a regular ben noach. Das heißt, as der din lakuf is kol ba'i ha'olam lekabel chulu, is nicht verbunden mit dem din von ger toishav. In other words, what the Rebbe Melech HaMashiach tells us in this sicha, in this talk, that the Ragachover says is what the Rambam is telling us, that this mitzvah of forcing the world, every individual that we can reach, to keep these commandments is really nothing to do with the halachic status of ger toishav. Even if he's not a ger toishav, for whatever reason, such as nowadays, and nowadays means for the past 2,500 years, nothing to do with ger toishav. Valpize, yum tak diuk seder lashna Rambam in der halacha hanal. Now, with that said, it comes out now very sweet, very beautiful, the precision of the Rambam's language in this above-mentioned ruling of his. And now we're going to quote the Rambam and see how it all really fits. Tziva Moshe Rabbeinu mipi hagvura lakuf es kol ba'i ha'olam. Moses commanded by the word of God to force all the people of the world lekabel mitzvos shenitztavu b'nei Noach, to accept the commandments that the Bnei Noach were commanded. V'chol mi shelo yakabel yehareg, and whoever does not accept them shall be put to death. And the one who does accept them is throughout referred to as the ger toishav. And he needs to accept them upon himself in front of 3 chaverim, 3 observant, learned, trustworthy Jews. Therefore was the Rambam zogt. Now, from the fact that the Rambam states lakuf lekabel mitzvos shenitztavu, that we, the Jews, are to force them to accept these commandments, und führt nicht uns gleich, and doesn't immediately say then lekabel mitzvos shenitztavu v'yiyu kegerim toishavim v'kayetze bazeh al derech l'shen b'makom acher, and the Rambam does not say in order for them to then become ger toishavs. He doesn't say it like that. He doesn't say we need to force them, we need to influence them to see to it that they accept the 7, so that they then become. No. He says it like that in other places, but here it doesn't say that. Is mashma, from this is implied, as the ringen von am vamakabel oisam hu nanikra ger toishav. So now when the Rambam says these words, that one who accepts them is called a ger toishav, is an inyan bifnei atzmoi. It's a separate idea. There's 2 things, there's 2 parts, as the Rambam makes it very clear by the order of how he puts the statement. First, the Jews have to see to it, to get the non-Jews, to keep the 7 commandments that Moses told us from God, and they were already commanded back from Noach. That's 1. And then when part 2, that anyone who accepts it is called a ger toishav and needs to accept it in front of a beis din, a court of 3 chaverim, that's not an explanation or an elaboration of the first part of his statement. It's a separate statement. Upshita, and it's obvious, as der tzivui lakuf es kol boi ha'olam lekabel mitzvos shenitztavu b'nei Noach, that the commandment that the Jews have to compel all of the people of the world to accept the Noachite commandments is to lieb den gufa shekabel mitzvos shenitztavu aleim, is for the purpose and the goal that they should accept it. The Jew has an obligation to force the world to keep these mitzvahs. What's the point? What's the reason? So that they keep it. End of story. And it's not so that they can come into the status of a ger toishav. That's a separate story. That's a separate, not even obligation. It's a separate option when it's available. And as we said, now it's not available. It hasn't been available since before the destruction of the first temple. Doesn't matter. Maybe unfortunate. Maybe many non-Jews wish they could be a ger toishav. All right, but this is what it is. You know what they say? Could have, should have, would have. Here we are. This is the situation. So there's an obligation for the Jew to influence the non-Jew to keep the 7, so that the non-Jew keeps the 7. Und wie es ist euch mashma von Kesef Mishnah, and as it's also implied from one of the main commentaries on the Rambam, the Kesef Mishnah. Benegei an Eved, was hat sich nicht mal gewen. With regards to an Eved Kanani, a slave that's not Jewish, but he's owned by a Jew, which again, this does not apply. We don't have the laws of slaves nowadays. But when a Jew was able to own an Eved Kanani, that Eved, that non-Jew, because he's becoming property of the Jew, he needs to do certain things and accept certain things. And then he becomes obligated in keeping many commandments of the Torah, way beyond the 7. In the words of the halacha, it's a partial conversion. He's gone out of being a regular non-Jew. He's not Jewish. He's not a regular non-Jew. So if you have an Eved that was not circumcised, Zok the Rambam, so the Rambam says as follows: Mutar l'kaimoi, the Jew is allowed to keep this person as such, u bilvad, but here is the condition, provided that sheikabel olav sheva mitzvahs shentzvav b'nei noyach. This Eved has to accept upon himself to keep the 7 commandments. Avolim lo kibel olav sheva mitzvahs yehorig miyad. But if he doesn't accept upon himself to keep the 7, he is to be killed immediately. Was der Tam von dem Din is, what's the reason for that law? Why is that the law with regards to an Eved? The reason for that is the law that we just quoted from the laws of kings, that the Jew is obligated to force the non-Jew to accept and to keep these 7. And if not, he's put to death. Now, the Jew doesn't have the power to put him to death. So, in many, if not most cases, it becomes hypothetical or theoretical that, yeah, really, this person should be put to death. But what can I do? Okay, so you don't kill him. But you have an obligation, as a Jew, to try to influence him and do what you can to get him to keep the 7. But here's a situation where I do have the ability and the control to give him the option or to kill him, because he's an Eved. He's property. He belongs to the Jew completely. And therefore, you tell him, you need to accept these 7. And if not. The Ravid is Afdem Masig. And then the Ravid, which is the primary critic of the Rambam, the Ravid critiques these words of the Rambam. And he says, Ein lonu ato laharig ish. We're not to kill anybody now. The Ravid says, no, don't do any of this killing. What are you saying? That whoever doesn't accept it should be killed immediately? The Ravid says, we are not to kill anybody. Zokter Rufter Kesef Mishneh. So again, this Kesef Mishneh commentary says about those words of the Ravid, Ein kan asog al divrei Rabbeinu. The Ravid is not critiquing, he's not disagreeing in any way on the words of our teacher, of the Rambam. And the Kesef Mishnah says very sharply that if we now, unfortunately, due to our sins, don't have the strength and the ability to carry out what we need to, that's no reason or excuse that the Rambam should refrain from writing it as it is and writing the law. And therefore the Rambam writes that he should be put to death immediately. That's not practical, we can't do it, so we can't. But the Rambam needs to tell us what the actual law would be, what it is. So when the Ravid says don't kill anybody, who's saying to kill anybody? Yeah, we can't, we're not in that situation. It's from them move on. So from this is understood. As their din, tziva lakuf lekabel mitzvahs v'chol mishay lo yekabel yehareg, is a chiyuv v'elchriz betokvay oich bizman hazeh. From that is understood that that the Rambam says, the commandment that the Jew has to go out and to force them, and they have to accept it, and whoever doesn't should be put to death. This is an obligation which is in its full force even nowadays. When we don't have the Jubilee year, and therefore the guy can't become a Ger Teishav. And also when we're in a situation where we don't have the power to be able to kill anybody. However, this is not the case when it comes to the Ger Teishav. Paskint the Rambam, so the Rambam clearly rules that we do not accept the Ger Teishav unless there's a Yovel. So in this Sicha, the Rebbe Melech HaMashiach makes it very clear as he's introducing the campaign of the 7 Echad Commandments that there are 2 very distinct parts to it. One is Ger Toishav, and put that aside. Learn about it, understand what it is, but it's not practical right now. Can't do it. Okay? Technically we can't do it. Put it aside. But then there still remains, just as ever, the obligation for the Jew to see to it to get the non-Jew to keep the 7 mitzvahs. All right, and I bring down all the elaborate footnotes from the Sicha. Next part from the same Sicha. Eger Toishav is there, was kibbel auf sich beweisen shel Yisrael zu mekayim sein die 7 mitzvahs bnei Noach. Eger Toishav is one who accepted upon himself in a Jewish court to keep the 7 Noachide commandments. V'kivin shekibulon beveistin hu nikra b'sheva mitzvahs elu mitzuve v'oiseh. Now, once he accepted upon himself in front of a Jewish tribunal to keep these commandments, with regards to these commandments, he now is in the category of mitzuve v'oiseh, which means commanded and keeps. Because we know that there are two categories. There's one who's commanded, and then there's one who's doing it voluntarily, not as an obligation. And the one who's commanded is obviously much greater. And in such a case, we, the Jewish community, are obligated to support him. Even if he's not a ger toishav. But if he accepted it upon himself to keep these 7 commandments, the Jewish community has an obligation to take care of that person. ובן נויח הוא שלא קיבלון בבייסטין, אלא דקימלון שמקיים מויסם מיעצמוי, והוא נידון בהם כמו שאינו ציבבויסה. What would be a regular ben noyach? That's someone who did not formally accept them in a beis-din, but we know that he's keeping them on his own. Then, what is he? Non-commanded. Then, he is doing it as a volunteer. Non-obligatory. That was a quote from the Ritva, one of the Rishonim commentary on the Talmud. So the Ritva says very clearly that if there's no formal acceptance, then the person is not obligated to keep the 7. And if he keeps them, beautiful. He's doing it as a volunteer. Und goy stam is there was is nit nizar in die sein mitzvahs. So what's a regular goy? Regular goy is one who doesn't keep the 7 at all. Forget about accepted nixah. He's not careful to keep them. So according to the Ritva, we have the goy stam, a regular non-Jew who doesn't keep the 7. Then we have a ben noyach, who is one who didn't accept them, but we know and we see that he's keeping them. That is einoi mitzvah v'oiseh, is not commanded. And then there is the ben noyach that accepted them, and then we have the Jewish community has an obligation to take care of him. That's the Ritva. Lefi zeh kum tuis l'chayra. So according to that, what seemingly comes out as ba matan Torah is batel geworden der chiyuv v'tzivui zu bnei Yisrael af kiyum mitzvahs shalahem. Und wie die Gemara sagt, auf dem Pasuk, Amad vaymoide deretz ra vayater goyim ra zayin mitzvahs shekiblu aleim bnei noyach v'loi kimum amad v'yitir lahem. All right, so it comes out that when God gave us the Torah, the obligation to keep these 7 for the Jewish people was revoked. In other words, until the revelation at Sinai, until that awesome day of the festival of Shavuos, till whatever it was, the 6th of Sivan, let's say, in the year 2448 since creation, when God revealed himself and spoke to us and said the 10 commandments and gave us the Torah, that changed everything. Until then, the world has one type of people, and those are all Noachites. Avraham, Yitzchak, Yaakov, Sarah, Rivka, Rachel, Leah. the 12 sons of Jacob, their descendants, those Hebrews that were exiled in the land of Egypt and enslaved and suffered and were rescued by Moshe Rabbeinu, all those people in all that time, they were B'nai Noach, like anybody else. Like all the sons of Noach, Shem, Cham, Yefes, all the same. And everybody's got to keep the 7. Comes Matan Torah, the giving of the Torah, the revelation at Sinai. And God revoked the 7. No more. And now he tells the Jews, here, I'm giving you these, which ultimately ends up being 613 commandments. And as far as the non-Jews are concerned, based on an interpretation in the Talmud to a verse from Chavakuk, they also no longer have an obligation to abide by and keep the 7. Und die Gemara führt dort aus, Loimar shafilu mekaiman oisan ein mekablim aleim schar, ki metzuva voise ela ki mi sheinu metzuva voise. Ein metzuva mekaiman. And the Gemara says, the Talmud says, to teach you that if a non-Jew is keeping these 7 Noachide commandments at that point, he does not get rewarded in the same category and in the same way as one who's obligated and commanded to keep it, but rather as someone who voluntarily accepted it upon himself, which is a much lesser reward. Und es ist gewähnt bei Matan Torah an neuer Chiyuv b'negea design mitzvahs. But now, when God gave the Torah, that revelation at Sinai, there became a new obligation in these 7. Der Rebbe hat angesagt bei Torah, as Bnei Noach seine Mechuyev in design mitzvahs. At that point, the Bnei Noach now became obligated. And that's why the Rambam's language is that God commanded through Moses that they have to keep these laws. Because at some point, before the revelation at Sinai, before the giving of the Torah, God removed the obligation of the 7 that he had originally given to Noach, to Adam and then to Noach. Because people weren't keeping them. So God said, so to say, you don't want them? You're not keeping them? No problem. Forget it. You don't have to. And now they're optional. That changed with the giving of the Torah. Is nischadish geworden a nayer din. So a new law now has been innovated by God. As when a ben Noach is mekabel design mitzvahs beweisen shol Yisrael heister mitzvah voise in design mitzvahs. So now, when a ben Noach accepts these 7 commandments formally in front of a Jewish tribunal, he then has just shifted and he has just changed his, not status, but his obligation from doing it voluntarily as an optional commandment to becoming obligatory. And now he is a mitzvah v'oiseh. So it's within every individual's hands as to whether they want to remain someone who is keeping it voluntarily or someone who is keeping it because you're commanded and you have to. Everyone can choose. Und der Rebbe sagt der Rambam, als Kabbalah Vasiyah darf sein, Pnei Shetziva Kodesh Baruch Hu B'Torah V'Idyonu Al Yemei Rabbeinu. And that's why the Rambam stresses that the non-Jews have to accept it because we were commanded in the Torah. And God gave it through Moses. In other words, it's not just God said, God commanded, he gave it to Adam, he gave it to Noach, and that's why everyone's got to keep it. No more. Now it's going through the Matan Torah. Because the previous obligation was revoked. All right, that's one approach, that's one way of learning. The next piece is going to deal with, also from the same Sikha, it's going to deal with the acceptance of the sovereignty of heaven, of God Almighty, and afterwards the acceptance of his commandments. And that's the order that it generally needs to go in. logically, first you accept the authority, and then you follow what the authority tells you. We find this with, for the Jew, the mitzvah, the commandment of reciting the Shema, the declaration of the oneness of God, etc., every morning and every night. So there are several sections, several paragraphs from the Torah that the Jew is obligated to recite. The first one is referred to as accepting the yoke of heaven, as God is king. The second paragraph is referred to as the acceptance of the yoke of the commandments, meaning to accept, to keep all the commandments, not to transgress, to keep all the positive and to keep all the negative, to do what you're supposed to do and not do what you're not supposed to do. And it's in that particular order. It has to be in that order. So the first thing, the most basic thing, is accepting the yoke of heaven. That's it. We will do whatever you say because you are boss. You are everything. You are the creator. You are the commander. Next. Now we accept all of these commandments. We will do what you command us. And since that's very logical, it'll be the same thing with regards to the Bnei Noach and their observance. That it works the same way. We don't really have time to do this piece in its entirety. We'll just start it off, and perhaps next class we'll start again from the beginning. By a ger toishav is farana machloikes. With regards to a ger toishav, there is actually a disagreement. There's an argument. Eizel ger toishav. All right, this is from the Talmud in Tractate Avodah Zarah. Who is a ger toishav? What type of a non-Jew is called a ger toishav? What does it take to be a ger toishav? Kol shekibel olav bifnei gimel chaverim sheloi lavoid avodah zarah. Divrei Rabbi Meir. Anyone, a non-Jew, who accepts upon himself in front of three chaverim, three trustworthy, learned, observant Jews, not to worship idolatry. That's it. That is a ger toishav. Someone who formally accepts upon himself in front of the Jewish court, I will not worship anything other than God himself. Those are the words of Rebbe Meir. And the Chachamim say, it's anyone who accepted upon himself to keep the 7 Noachide commandments. Because idolatry is only one of the 7. According to the Chachamim, according to the sages, it is insufficient. That will not make him a ger toishav by merely accepting the prohibition of avodah zarah. The Rambam paskint, b'chama mekaymes, the Chachamim. The Rambam rules in a number of places where he speaks about the ger toishav, like the Chachamim. As darf mekabel zayin alle sheva mitzvahs, that he has to accept all 7. It's insufficient to become a ger toishav. It's insufficient to accept the observance of not worshiping idolatry. He has to accept all 7. In Hilchos Isurei Bia, Zokter, es aber mit an ander lashon. The Rambam actually says that in the laws of forbidden relations, where it's actually that is where the Rambam speaks about the laws of conversion. They're found in Isurei Bia, in the prohibition of marriage, who a Jew can not marry or can marry, etc. So over there, the Rambam says it as follows: Ezeo ger toishav. Who is considered a ger toishav? Ze akum, or whatever. It's probably a censor change. Shekibel olav shlo yavoid avodah zarah im shara mitzvahs shnestavu b'nei Noach. It is a non-Jew who accepted upon himself not to worship idolatry, along with the other commandments, the rest of the commandments that the Bnei Noach were commanded. And Seemingly, wie bald as darf mekabel sein, auf sich alle sein mitzvahs, since he has to accept upon himself all 7, as the Rambam just said, to become a ger teishav, he needs to accept all 7. Was bichlalan is oich shlei lavid avodah zarah. That included in the 7 is, of course, not to worship idolatry. For was dotelt das uis bazunder. So why here does the Rambam separate it? He should just say he accepts to keep all 7. All 7 include every one of the 7, including idolatry. Why does he say not to worship idolatry and all the rest? Good question. Obvious question. Straightforward question. The Rebbe Melcham Sheikh's question. Is the Asbara in them? So the explanation is as follows. Es steht in Mechilta, auf den Pasuk, Lo yelech holokim acherim al panai. One of the Tanoic explanations from the oral law on the verse, the second of the 10 Commandments, that you shall not have other gods al panai, in front of me, says God. Lama Nemar, so this Talmudic explanation presents the question, why does it say it? It says, I am God, your God. That's the first commandment. Mashal, lemelech basar v'dam. We can make an analogy over here. Compare this to a human king, a king of flesh and blood. Shenichnas lemedina, he entered into a country. Amru loy avadav. So his servants say to the king, Gezor aleim gzeiros. Make decrees. You're the king. So his servants say, make decrees on these people. Amr lahem. So the king says to his servants that are so excited and so zealous and they want him to rule over. He says, Kishi yikablu es malchusi egzor aleim. When they accept my sovereignty, then I will make decrees. Shi malchusi lo yikablu, gzeiroisai lo yikablu. For if they don't accept my kingship, my authority, then they won't accept my decrees. So in other words, the king said, what are my decrees worth if I'm not their king? So first they have to accept me as king. Then I'll make decrees. Kach omar hamakim liYisrael. So said God to the Jewish people. Anoichi Hashem alekecha lo yelecha. I am God, your God, you shall not have any others. Ani shekibaltem malchusi b'Mitzrayim. I am the one that you accepted his sovereignty. Amru loy kain. They responded and said, yes. V'chshem shekibaltem malchusi kablu gzeiroisai. So then God says, just as you've accepted my sovereignty, now accept my decrees. That's why the introduction to all of the decrees, all of the commandments, all of the laws and the rules that God gave the Jewish people, first he says, I am God, and you shall not have any others. That's his introduction. That's how he introduces himself. Because if not that, what is it worth that I'm going to give you decrees? So first of all, let's establish that. I am God. You're God. I took you out of Egypt. Right? You accepted me? I am your king? Is that true? Once we've established that, now we can move on. Das heißt, this means to say, by Matan Torah is given zwei inyonim. By the giving or by the receiving of the Torah at Sinai, there were actually two ideas, two things are going on here. Kabbalas malchusei shel HaKadosh Baruch Hu, the acceptance of the sovereignty, the kingship of God, und Kabbalas malchus drückt sich aus euch in dem was anechi v'lo yelecha mipi hagvura shamaynu. And this idea of the Jewish people accepting the sovereignty of God is expressed in the first two statements of God. I am your God who took you out of Egypt, and you shall not have any others. And we heard those directly from God, as opposed to the others. Those first ones, the Jewish people heard direct. Which is not the case with regards to accepting the decrees, accepting the commandments, in the andere dibros, in the other commandments. And in general, as the verse states, towards the end of the 5 books, it says, Torah, we were commanded. Who commanded us? Moshe. And that's an inheritance for the people of Israel. Says the Talmud, Torah begematria taf reish yud aleph. The word Torah has the numerical value of 611. You know that every letter is a number. Aleph is 1, Beis is 2. The last letter taf is 400. So the word Torah is spelled taf, 400. Vav, 6. Reish, 200. Hey, 5. Total, 611. Torah, we were commanded by Moshe. We, the people, received and heard and accepted the Torah of God through Moshe. 611. But there are 613. The first 2, Anoichi, I am your God. Lo yiyeh lecha, you shall not have any other gods. Those appear direct from God. That's not from Moshe. So therefore, Torah was commanded to us through Moshe. 611 from Moshe, because the first 2 were from God. So those first 2 are not only the first ones, but they're the basis for everything. You can't move on to have any commandment, any decree, if you don't first establish who's in charge, who's the king. All right. To be continued with Hashem's help. And in the meantime, until next time, wishing everyone much success in the observance of the 7 Noahide commandments, because they're God-given through Moses for all of mankind to keep and to make this world the perfect world ultimately, which God wants, and is the purpose of creation. And we're already entering that era, the times of Mashiach, and may Mashiach be completely and totally revealed for all immediately now.